Being a burden. Sounds like an inherently bad thing, but that's not looking at the whole picture. To love someone and spend your life with them is to help share in their burden, and have them share in yours in return. But this is easier said than done. It requires opening up to someone about the things that are troubling you, and having the humility to accept help. It's no wonder so many romance anime highlight relying on your loved ones. My Teen Romantic Comedy SNAFU is truly an enigma of an anime. The first season is this blockily animated comedy forward show with a misanthropic protagonist who is dragged kicking and screaming into the world of human relationships. Easy enough to wrap your head around. But then the tone shift going into season 2 is like a ton of bricks dropped onto your head. The new animation style pairs with a radical departure in genre. Comedy is out the window for the most part, and this season is an exercise in agony as Hachiman denies his feelings. The immense satisfaction received when the dam finally breaks makes it worth it. And then season 3 brings its own ideas to the party, and becomes this esoteric, sometimes deeply sad reflection on the nature of relationships and the truth. And at the end of it all, you're sitting there like, what on earth did I just watch? But in a good way. Because even though the dialogue can be a bit dense at times, or the plot can drag out for a moment or two, watching the love grow and change between our main 3 characters is enthralling and thought-provoking. At the heart of this show is one of my favorite confession scenes I've seen in any romance anime. For a show centered around love interests that are foreign to the normal workings of relationships, a typical confession would not suffice. Instead, the confession is focused more on the shortcomings of our friends, rather than their good points. At the heart of this is the fear of being a burden on your loved one, and the trust needed to rely on someone else. This theme is embodied fully here, but is also nestled in every nook and cranny of the rest of the series. Let's talk about it. We'll get to Yui later, but I want to start with Hachiman and Yukino. Both of them are defined by being isolated people. The entire premise of the show is that Hachiman is forced to join the volunteer club with Yukino because Hiratsuka is punishing him, but secretly also pushing together these two loners. Both Hachiman and Yukino justify their isolation to themselves. Hachiman sneers at society and its machinations, and uses his underhanded schemes as further justification that he understands that which he doesn't partake in. Yukino deems that others dislike her because of her perceived status and general perfection, and hides behind her familial sense of responsibility to excuse her own shortcomings. But in reality, both of them are the same as any other lonely person. They crave companionship once they find it with each other and Yui, and work desperately to protect it. Even when it's abundantly clear that there is a love triangle bubbling beneath the surface of the club, they push it down as long as they can, for fear of losing the facsimile of what they once had. While on the surface, Hachiman and Yukino are cold and calculating people, they also care deeply about the ones that they love, and are quick to rush to the aid of anyone who needs it. There's a downside to the way that these two love, though. They care so much about the other that they are terrified of hurting them. One of the problems with being alone for so long is that relying on someone else does not come naturally to them. In their minds, even a small task given to a loved one is too much to ask. When you're used to doing everything yourself, falling back into this pattern is easy. What they can't see for the longest time is that relying on your loved ones for help may cause them inconvenience, or struggle, or difficulty, but it serves to strengthen the bond between you two. To love someone else is to share in their burden, and to do the same in return. Hiratsuka says as much to Hachiman on the bridge. That's what holding people dear is all about. It means you're prepared to hurt them. To Hachiman, who derives a lot of his self-worth from sacrificing himself to help others, this concept is almost painful to try to understand. It seems horribly full of yourself to impose on others like that, at least from his perspective. It's the same but in reverse for Yukino. She thinks extremely highly of herself, and therefore cannot bring herself to ask things of others. Compounding this is the relationship with her family. Her mother and sister impose impossibly high standards on Yukino, and Haruno specifically seems to take extreme pleasure in pointing out any perceived areas of weakness in her sister. The word repeated over and over in the third season of the show is codependency, first given out by Haruno in relation to the love triangle. This cuts deeply for Yukino and Hachiman, who still view relying on others as something selfish and shameful. It's extremely cruel of Haruno, a woman who seems to have no real relationships herself, to twist the knife like this, and portray love as something to eschew in favor of independence. Hachiman's entire subplot of planning a second prom to get Yukino's approved is required in large part due to Yukino's walls being thrown up due to her sister's heckling. This is a good time to get to the main event, Hachiman's confession to Yukino. Towards the end of season 3 of the anime, Hachiman's big revelation is that he doesn't want to lose his connection with Yukino. Seems reasonably tame, but through the lens of his character, this willful tethering to another person is a massive change. He baits Yukino into having a second prom just to stay connected to her, and this action is the final crack that opens the floodgates of the confession. And just like with the rest of the series, this is about the pain it causes them to trust and rely on each other. After feeble attempts at justifying his desires, Hachiman has to come out and just admit that he wants to be with Yukino, wants the responsibility of being her partner. He describes being with her as distorting her life, pulling her off the intended path for his own selfish reasons. He frames it as a deal, where in return for her time, he will give her his life, his companionship. And Yukino does the same in return, undercutting her own worth, saying she's difficult to deal with and tiresome to be around. I feel like I'll only become more useless as I continue to rely on you. To be a burden is to be worthless. But this is obviously not true. The way that they hold each other is evidence enough. There's something deeply romantic about this confession, even if on the surface it seems self-deprecating. Underneath the layers and layers of defenses and ego that these two have built up under years of isolation, they're scared. Scared that no one will love them, scared that they're not worth someone else's time. So for them, to admit this to the person that they want to spend the rest of their life with is a leap of faith, and a baring of the soul that once seemed impossible. Not just being vulnerable, but accepting that they can rely on each other. It's a privilege to bear the burden of your loved ones. This scene embraces that idea fully, and finally lets our two friends tell each other as much. Now let's talk about Yui. First up, off the bat, we are not talking about the OVA for the final season or the Shin series of novels. They really just don't ring true to me about who Yui is, and actively undercut the development of her character across the main series. Anyway, Yui is stuck between Hachiman and Yukino. As the one who understands feelings, she is often bearing the burden of the two of them, whether they realize it or not. Honestly, in season 3 of the anime, she is incredibly sad. While Hachiman and Yukino are still living in willful ignorance, she can see the way that they are drawn to each other. She loves Hachiman, but knows that she can't beat Yukino in this game. Her love for both of them is strong and leaves her stuck in place. She tries to reach out to Hachiman, but gets shut down over and over. She fights to keep the friend group together throughout the seasons, while knowing that this is only going to push her two friends closer together. It's an impossible situation, and watching her come to terms with that is brutal, especially as a contrast point to the other two sides of the love triangle. My teen romantic comedy SNAFU is not alone in the genre of misanthropic protagonists learning the value of love and relationships, but its reflections on what it means to love someone and the effect that sharing burdens with a loved one has on the relationship are really special. The confession between Hachiman and Yukino is the culminating moment of this, where they finally, agonizingly come to rely on each other. This is a wonderful thing, of course, but making these two specific characters grapple with the implications of love really pulls back and makes us appreciate how we support and are supported by the loved ones around us all the time. At the end of it all is the most romantic confession I've seen yet. And that ends this week's episode of Love and Anime. If you enjoyed, liking and subscribing helps a ton, as well as hitting the hype button on the mobile app. This also should be the last weekend I'm out of town, so Split Screen should be back soon. I'm also happy to report that I am working on getting the couple of songs I've made onto streaming services, so expect those soon if you liked the music. I'm SlamAnime, and have a great rest of your day.